This video is sponsored by Displate.
I'm vengeance.
Welcome to the ScreenCrush break room, and we have all the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in The Batman. There is so much for us to break down in this movie. 3 hours of a dark superhero neo-noir that's filled with Easter eggs. So let's get started. The movie begins from the Riddler's POV as he watches the family of Mayor Mitchell. Now, because this movie begins on Halloween, we saw a parallel with the movie Halloween, which also begins with a POV shot from the villain. Also, we pointed this out in our Ending Explained video, but this scene is one of many parallels between Batman and the Riddler. Later in the movie, Bruce watches Selina with binoculars, which we also see from his first-person point of view. And later, Riddler talks about how wearing a mask defined his identity, and that Batman helped him realize who he really is. And we've seen this trope with Batman villains numerous times.
No, you complete me.
You made me. Remember?
Mayor Mitchell's son is dressed as a ninja for Halloween. Ninjas are silent assassins, and the Riddler sneaks into the penthouse to kill Mitchell like a ninja. You're reaching. No, they could have dressed the kid up like anything. Could have been a cowboy or something, but instead, they chose a silent killer. In fact, that might even be a nod to the League of Shadows from the Dark Knight trilogy. Continue. So, Mitchell's study is decorated with newspaper headlines about the Maroni drug bust, which we later learn was set up by Falcone to remove one of his main competitors. Now, in the comics, Sal Maroni was the mobster who splashed acid on Harvey Dent's face, turning him into Two-Face, and Maroni was also featured in The Dark Knight. There's another smaller headline that reads, "Seawall construction halted." So, if any of you were wondering how the Riddler's bombs were able to break the wall so easily, now you know. The infrastructure money to reinforce the wall was likely routed back into the pockets of Falcone and his minions. So the mayor's on the phone in this scene, and looking back, he's probably talking to Falcone. He mentions that he thought he'd be doing better in the polls after they had the Gotham Post run positive stories about him, like the headlines featured in his study. This shows that this systemic corruption has also infiltrated the press. So this systemic corruption is also an influence from the noir film Chinatown, where a corrupt business interest siphons off the water of Los Angeles for his own financial gain. There are other Chinatown allusions that I'm going to talk about a little later in the video. Now, because the mayor is the face of all this corruption, the Riddler covers up his face, so the city can begin to see the truth. So, did you jump when the Riddler first appeared? I did. It reminded me of this moment in When a Stranger Calls. In fact, Batman and the Riddler make their first appearances in the same way, by emerging from darkness into the light. Except that Batman literally enters from the darkness into the light, whereas the Riddler stays in the darkness until light shines on him, just like how he is shining a light on the corruption of Gotham City. And this same cinematography motif is used throughout the film, with lens flares and shadows being used to obscure figures before they're fully revealed, in keeping with the story of trying to track down the Riddler and find out his real identity. In fact, the Riddler's whole goal was for Batman to bring Falcone into the light. Now, this version of the Riddler is heavily influenced by the comic book Batman Year One. In that comic, the Riddler is more of a mad bomber who leaves clues for Batman to follow his trail. In fact, this movie actually adapts many aspects from Batman Year One. That comic book follows a Year One Batman in a very grounded, realistic universe. I think at one point he actually trips over his cape.
Hey person, I really like these posters here in the break room.
Oh, you like those? Those are actually exclusive metal posters made by Displate, the sponsor of this video. These posters are great. They're durable, but you hang them with magnets. And they have posters officially licensed by Star Wars, Marvel, DC, and Star Trek, like this one.
Do they have posters of my favorite stuff, like dogs and chicken wings?
Actually, they do. Displate has more than 1.4 million designs from artists all over the world. It's like, I just love these two sci-fi designs. They tell a story without having to be connected to a movie or a TV show. I mean, this site is a long rabbit hole to go down if you want to explore everything.
But then, how will the people choose?
Well, if you click the link in the description, you'll see my profile where I've curated some of my favorite posters on the site. Each Displate is printed on demand, has a fast delivery, and is signed by a master of production. Plus, every time you buy one of these metal posters, Displate plants a tree. So, buying a Displate is good for the environment and for your break room. Now, we're offering ScreenCrush fans a special discount if you click the link in the description. Click the link in the description to get your first 1 to 2 Displates for 25% off. Buy 3 or more Displates and the discount is 29% off.
What a savings!
You're darn right. Another comic this story borrows from is The Great Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. It's a 13-issue long origin story for Two-Face, where Batman attempts to hunt down a serial killer called Holiday. Holiday's primary target are mobsters and the family of Carmine Falcone. Now, not only does this movie also begin on October 31st, just like The Long Halloween, but they also replace the holiday killer with the Riddler, who's also after Falcone. Now, I mentioned earlier there are many similarities between Riddler and Batman. Another strong one is that they both keep diaries. Bruce keeps kind of a taxi driver-esque recounting of his life as Batman.
When that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning.
While the Riddler's diaries are encrypted ramblings that are stashed in his apartment. Now, Bruce narrating the movie from his journal is another aspect that was borrowed from Batman Year One. Then we follow a gang of teens in clown makeup assaulting people on the street. So, look, I don't gotta tell you that kids in clown makeup reminds us an awful lot of the Joker. In fact, in Batman Beyond, there was a street gang called the Jokers that drew inspiration from the original villain. So since this movie does end with the Joker incarcerated, maybe this is implying that Batman was the one who put him away, and that this street gang is inspired by him. Remember, this is Year 2 for this Batman. Maybe sometime during Year 1, Batman hunted down a criminal in clown makeup. Then, like Arthur Fleck, he inspired people to dress up like him and spread a little chaos. Or this makeup could just be influenced by the makeup of the goons in Batman Forever, which could be intentional because the Riddler is also the villain in both movies. And actually, one of these actors is Jay Licurgo. He's on the show Titans, where he plays Tim Drake, the original hero to become Robin. Now, I thought it was interesting that one of these guys, the one they're kind of initiating, is wearing half clown makeup, very similar to the look of Two-Face. This is another way of showing that Gotham is kind of on the brink. It can teeter off into madness, or the people can clear out the corruption, wash their collective faces, and come out clean. I think you can tell a lot about a Batman by their first entrance. Batman 89 came gliding in. Affleck appeared like a horror movie monster, and Bale used brute force to yank Carmine Falcone out of his limo. But this Batman slowly emerges from the shadows, walking on the ground, because he's more of a grounded character than any Batman we've seen before. Now, we pointed this out in our first video about this movie a couple years ago, but the bat symbol on his chest appears to be made from a gun. Batman, of course, hates guns because they killed his parents.
These are loud and clumsy. These are the weapons of cowards.
Also, his whole suit looks like it could be like made of guns, just melted down and riveted together. So I love how he's taken this symbol of death and made it powerless. In fact, he's turned it into a symbol of defense. The mayor's son finds his body, which creates an unspoken bond between him and Bruce. All through the movie, Bruce keeps noticing this kid, and we know that every time he looks at him, he's remembering how he felt the night his parents died. At the crime scene, the Riddler painted post headlines with the word lies. Now, they don't come right out and say this in the movie, but it's heavily implied that the reporter who was going to expose the Waynes was the Riddler's father, and that his death made Riddler an orphan, which would mean that he and Bruce were orphaned within a few days of each other, another parallel between the two of them. So if his father was this murdered reporter, then he would take particular affront to the press being controlled by Falcone, which is why he paints them all as liars. He sees both himself and the dead reporter as champions of the truth, trying to expose the lies of the city. The irony here is that the reporter was on Maroni's payroll, so he was just as corrupt as everyone else in the system. The song that plays in the beginning is Something in the Way by Nirvana. It's a song about homelessness and despair, where the singer talks about being trapped with the animals who become his pets. In the same way, Gotham City has hit its point of despair, and its menagerie of animals, people dressed as falcons, bats, cats, and penguins, have become part of the fabric of the city. And hey, speaking of animals, this whole movie borrows heavily from the great Batman story, The Court of Owls. In that book, Bruce discovers that for centuries, Gotham has been controlled by a secret cabal called the Court of Owls. Now, that comic also dealt with Bruce Wayne trying to revitalize the city with development funds, which endangered the court's control of Gotham. Whereas in the movie, Thomas Wayne's development fund became a piggy bank for mobsters and corrupt politicians for decades. Batman's gauntlets even seem to mimic the weapons of Talon, the court's enforcer from the comics. Talon traveled using underground tunnels just like Bruce does in this movie. The Batcave is in an abandoned Wayne terminal beneath his family's land. Now, this is also taken from Batman Earth 1, where he's headquartered in an abandoned train station. But it's fitting that he chooses to live underground. I mean, after all, his parents are underground, and in this way, his parents are always with him. I'm also wondering if this terminal was supposed to be revitalized with the money from the renewal fund. But, like the rest of Gotham, it's been allowed to sink further into ruin. And there's also a degree of foreshadowing here. His cave is sinking into the water, just as the Riddler wants to drown Gotham with water. But the water ends up symbolizing a kind of baptism, where Bruce and Gotham City shed their quest for vengeance. So this version of Thomas Wayne was running for mayor, which was also a plot point in Batman Earth 1. He was running for mayor against the Penguin. But this was also a key part of the Joker.
There's something wrong with those people. I am here to help them. I'm going to lift them out of poverty, help make their lives better. That is why I'm running.
Now I think in a lot of ways this movie is an inversion of Joker, like a companion piece. They both even have the big letters title sequence. The channel Heavy Spoilers had a great observation. The color scheme of the title and its poster seem inspired by the Batman Dark Victory comics, which are the sequels to The Long Halloween. The Joker was about the corrupt leaders stealing from the people and the powerless rising up to enforce mob rule. But this movie, while they have the corrupt leaders stealing money from the people, does not celebrate mob rule. It condemns it. And by the way, Wayne Manor looks like the house from What We Do in the Shadows, or like what I imagine Cameron Fry's house would look like.
It's very beautiful and very cold, and you're not allowed to touch anything.
Bruce has even left his parents' room untouched to show that for him, their death is unresolved. It was a moment in time when his growth became frozen and he had to become something new. Then he goes to the Iceberg Lounge, and I'm guessing that's the name because it's run by the Penguin. And holy hell, does Colin Farrell look unrecognizable. The scars on his face and nose make him look like he has a beak. His limp gives him the look of a penguin's waddle. He was once going to play Batman, you know. Now in the Earth 1 comic, Penguin was the mayor and he ended up having the Waynes killed. In this movie, that role was fulfilled by Falcone. The twins from Teen Wolf are the bouncers, and Batman takes them down pretty easily. He actually enters this club 3 times. Once as Batman, bashing heads, and then once as Bruce Wayne, when his privilege earns him an invite. But the 3rd time, he sneaks in using his ninja skills. This is also like the 3 ways Batman deals with crime. Dressed as a bat doing violence, through philanthropic work as Bruce Wayne, and on the street level doing disguises like the hood matches Malone.
Hey, you're a friend of Tony Zuko's, ain't you?
You do an awful lot of wondering for someone we ain't ever seen before.
I love how crusty and dirty everything looks in this city. I thought Nolan's Gotham was dark, but this movie makes Nolan look like Schumacher.
You get the ice, I'll get the ice, man.
You can see the influence of 60s and 70s new wave dramas all over this thing. Like how the Penguins Club is by an elevated train. It calls to mind the griminess of the French Connection chase. Now at the club, we're introduced to Selina Kyle, and she's kind of an amalgam of different Catwomen that we've seen over the years. She rides a motorcycle like Anne Hathaway, wears stitched leather outfits like Michelle Pfeiffer, and I never saw the Catwoman movie, so I really can't make any comparisons about it. At one point, she says,
"Maybe we're not so different."
Which is actually a lot like the bond that Bruce and Selina shared in the Tim Burton films.
We're the same. We're the same.
Now she does owe a lot of her design to the comic book Batman Year One. In that book, Selina was a sex worker who looked after a lot of cats, and she also looked after her young, blonde best friend, kind of like Annika in this movie. At one point, she even wears a tight t-shirt and leather leggings, just like Selina does in that comic. Now, the whole plot line where it's revealed that she is Falcone's illegitimate daughter is also taken directly from the comics, and that scene where she breaks into the crime scene to steal something from a safe is taken from The Long Halloween. Except in the comic, it was a ledger and not a passport. Also in this movie, Selina fulfills the role of a femme fatale from a detective noir film. Now this is the sultry female that sets the hero on his quest, and he's never really sure if he can trust her.
She's my daughter.
I said I want the truth.
She's my sister. She's my daughter.
The police commissioner is named Pete Savage, and there was a guy named Pete Savage in the old 60s Batman series. Specifically, he appeared in the episode An Egg Grows in Gotham, where the main villain was Egghead and his henchmen Benedict and Fu Young.
Is that relevant?
Is anything?
Continue.
So here's a super obscure Easter egg, a very deep cut. In the 1970s, there was a live-action superhero special called The Legend of the Superheroes. It was terrible. It featured all sorts of DC characters, but it was also a reunion for the 1960s Batman show. It featured Adam West, Burt Ward, and Frank Gorshin as the Riddler. You can't really find this special online, but I own the DVD. The ending featured Batman pressuring the Riddler to reveal the location of a bomb. Now, I know that sounds pretty generic, but the creator of the special, Bill Carruthers, was specifically thanked in the credits of The Batman. And in the scene where the Riddler is arrested, you can clearly see that he lives on Carruthers Avenue. So this special had to have had some kind of effect on the overall creative process of this movie. Now, the Riddler kills him by injecting him with rat poison. So when the rats solve the maze and eat his face flesh, they also end up dying from poison. This is actually the Riddler broadcasting his entire plan. The rat is Falcone, feasting on the flesh of Gotham City. He's unaware of it, but he's slowly killing himself. And of course, this entire entire idea of rats eating your face is taken from George Orwell's novel 1984. The Riddler also manipulates social and mass media, just like the Joker did in previous movies.
Uh-oh. You don't look happy. He's been using Brand X.
You see, this is how crazy Batman's made Gotham.
Now, in all of these cases, the villains were seeking to weaponize fear, just like Batman does. Now, just like in the comics, this Riddler enjoyed puzzles as a child and found that he had a knack for them. And, much like the Riddler in Batman the Animated Series, he uses this skill to get revenge on the people who've wronged him during his life.
Your amoral greed is no match for an intellect like mine.
Oh, yeah? Then tell me something, Eddie. If you're so smart, why aren't you rich?
I also like how this movie developed the relationship between Alfred and Bruce. He's constantly having to mind young Master Wayne that his other life has value, and that there is more than one way to help the city. And he mentions later in the movie that he blamed himself for the Waynes' deaths, because he was supposed to defend them. So this version of Alfred was Thomas's bodyguard. He also says that he taught Bruce how to fight, which is also taken from the Earth 1 comic, where Alfred was kind of a soldier/guardian first, and kind of a pretend butler second. Then we get to the funeral, where we see that people are actually responding to the Riddler's message, again foreshadowing that he has a loyal, violent followers who will carry on his work in the climax. At the funeral, we learn that Thomas Wayne actually saved Falcone's life, another plot point borrowed from The Long Halloween. Andres Brilland on Twitter notes that it looked like Zoe Kravitz's Selina was going to be the woman walking with Falcone at the funeral, but instead it's a character named Carla in the credits, who could be Falcone's sister from the comics, Carla Falcone. Just before the car crashes the funeral, Bruce lays eyes on the Riddler in broad daylight. This is actually borrowing a bit from Batman 89, when Bruce Wayne sees the Joker kill a gangster and he approaches him in the light of day. The car's license plate reads S397WD, a neat nod to 1939, the year of Batman's first appearance in Detective Comics number 27, and 7WD is a deep cut Batman reference to your mom. Now, I keep mentioning the comic Batman Year One as an influence on this movie, and there are a few other nods to that comic. The primitive squirrel suit that he uses to fly is like his Golden Age era glider in that book. He also spends much of that comic fighting police, just like in this movie, because he isn't yet trusted by the institution. The bat signal is even on an abandoned construction project, which is a way of saying that his career is still a work in progress. You can also tell that he's a young Batman because of all the mistakes that he makes. He slams into the train track when he's flying. Alfred has to help him with ciphers. It's very cool to see a Batman who's not... Then we get to the car chase and the most badass moment in the movie. I love the rawness of this Batmobile. It's riveted together. It's not the sleek Batmobile that we usually see. It's clunky, it's exposed at the back, it makes a rough engine sound when it starts. It also has the effect of scaring the hell out of criminals. The car chase was so awesome, so kinetic, and yet so clumsy. The rain really made it feel like it would be impossible to drive away from this guy. In fact, director Matt Reeves used the same swivel effect during the car chase as the tank scene in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Now, when Batman and Gordon are done questioning the Penguin, they get messages from the Riddler. And these are in green text, his signature color from the comics. His next move is to try to assassinate Bruce Wayne and to shame his family. He reveals that Martha's mother killed her dad and then herself. And these are also plot points borrowed from the Batman Earth 1 comic. That comic also reveals that her last name is Arkham and that her family had a history of insanity, which, just saying, her son might have a touch of.
Lights out! Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
When Bruce's grandma killed herself, she said that she was being haunted by a great bat with wings. Again, maybe hinting there's a little bit of something obsessive in his DNA. Riddler also leaks evidence that Thomas hired Falcone to kill a reporter named Edward Elliot. Now, this was the last name of a family friend of the Waynes in the comics, one of whom went on to become the villain called Hush. And Riddler also wrote the word Hush across the Wayne's name in his video. And the idea that the Wayne family could be corrupt was also explored in the Court of Owls storyline, when the group tries to make Bruce believe that his father was a member of their little cabal. I did like the twist that Falcone was able to use the Wayne's renewal fund to control Gotham City. Symbolically, it ties Bruce Wayne to the city. His father's death was the moment he lost all hope, and in a larger sense, it's what caused the city to lose all hope. What Falcone did was worse than murder. He corrupted Bruce's family's legacy. So, just before Alfred is caught in the explosion, we see my favorite Easter egg in the whole video. He's sitting next to a bust of Shakespeare. This is an homage to the 1960s Batman show, when the Batcave entrance was opened with a button hidden under Shakespeare's head. Oh, and at one point, Selina asks if Batman lives in a cave. Get it? like the Batcave. Falcone pins the Waynes' murder on Maroni, and later Alfred pins it on Falcone. Or maybe it could just be a random hood who killed the Waynes. Either way, I like that there's ambiguity here. I think that Batman's origin works best when it's a nameless guy. That way, Batman can think that every hood is the one who killed his parents. There are also a lot of locations around Gotham City mentioned and hinted at throughout the movie. One of the cops mentions Blackgate Prison from the comics. There are also road signs from the DC universe, such as Gotham Docks, which is referenced in the Arkham Asylum games. There's also Robinson Bridge and Robinson Island. And in the No Man's Land comic story, this is where Catwoman lived with Holly Robinson and Poison Ivy. And there's also a Hinkley River, which could be a reference to South Hinkley. That was a borough of Gotham in Batman Gotham Knight and Dark Knight Rises. Now, I keep mentioning other film references in this movie. It also draws heavily from the works of David Fincher. The mask the Riddler wears was inspired by the Zodiac killer, and that mask is also very similar to Batman's. The ridges of the nose are almost exactly the same, really hitting home that the Riddler and Batman are the dark and light side of one another. And the Riddler himself seems modeled after John Doe from Seven. Both villains keep meticulous, rambling diaries in cramped apartments, and they manipulate the heroes into doing their bidding and then get caught on purpose. Speaking of which, the diner where Riddler is caught seems modeled after the Edward Hopper painting Nighthawks, where a sullen loner slumps over a counter deep in thought. Yet this diner also appeared several times throughout the movie just in the background. It was probably the killer's regular spot. In his apartment we see the prototype of the rat maze, but also of the bomb that he placed on Gil Coulson's neck. So, we all know that Batman is an agent of fear. It's his primary weapon against the underworld. That's why he dresses up as a rodent. But his war on crime is also about facing his own fears, his own darkness. For instance, he's scared of bats.
Bats frighten me.
Now, I wonder if the Riddler was so good at reading Batman that he could figure this out. And that is why he placed the final letter to him inside of a bat's cage. It's a way of making Batman conquer his final fear to learn the truth. Now, during the Riddler's Arkham Asylum monologue, he says that when he first saw Batman, he suddenly knew what he had to become. This is very much like Batman's origin. When a bat crashes through his window, he decides that he has to fight crime as a symbol.
Yes, Father. I shall become a bat.
Now, look. Does the Riddler know the secret? Does he know that Bruce Wayne's Batman? I know that we're meant to think that he does when he keeps saying Bruce Wayne. But then he just passes it off like he's talking about Bruce. But I think he figured it out, but he has no interest in revealing Batman's identity to the public. In the comics, he also figures it out, but he keeps it to himself. Because what's the point of a riddle if everyone knows the answer? I mean, otherwise, why would the Riddler go off on a rant about how Bruce was a privileged kid and not a real orphan? Then he goes on to say that he can see the real Batman, that the mask is the real him. And yeah, Batman wouldn't argue with him.
The voice kept calling me Bruce. In my mind, that's not what I call myself.
What do you call yourself?
Now, I love that he turned Batman into his accomplice and used him to get Falcone into the light. Now, we have a video coming out really soon with every clue that this was the Riddler's master plan. If you pay attention, all the details are in the background. For instance, that the murder weapon was a carpet tool. If the Riddler knew that Bruce was Batman, then he would have known that there's no way Bruce Wayne would have known what a carpet tool was for. Why?
I'm rich.
And the symbolism that the truth was under the rug is of course a nod to the truth being swept under the rug by the corrupt leaders of the city. And of course the big twist is that the Riddler was able to inspire other insane people to join his cause. Now we've seen this in other Batman movies before. In Batman '89, Gothamites scramble for the Joker's money. In The Dark Knight, he inspires mobs to go after this guy. And in Joker, mobs of protesters emulate his image. Batman is an instrument of vengeance and rage. So when other people see him acting outside the law, it makes them embrace this same violence and chaos. It's the impulse that makes the clown gang hit random people on the street, or for people to take over government buildings when they think the institutions have failed them. In our Ending Explained video, we talked at length about the final reveal, that the mob thinks that they are vengeance. This makes Bruce reevaluate his quest. He realizes that Batman can't be a symbol of vengeance. He has to be a symbol of hope. This is why he leads people out of harm's way, guiding them with this torch. And the first person he rescues is the son of the late mayor. In a way, he's reaching out to save the child inside himself. Then he saves the mayor, the woman who will carry on his father's legacy. And the final flooding of the city is like a biblical disaster when God flooded the world to cleanse it of sin. But it's also a custom in the New Testament to be baptized to cleanse oneself of your own sins. So this final flood is a way to symbolically purge the corruption from Gotham and begin a new day. In Batman's final monologue, he says that he's realized that vengeance doesn't change the past. In other words, he can be angry all he wants, but his parents are still dead. Now he has to figure out a way to live. Now let's talk about that final Riddler scene when he makes a friend in Arkham Asylum. You know who I'm talking about. Now, if you didn't recognize his voice, that was Barry Keoghan from the Eternals.
Please, make yourselves at home.
And yes, he was secretly cast as the Joker. Well done, secret keepers at the studio. It seems like the sequel is setting up a team-up with him and the Riddler. Now, we have a whole video coming out about this soon, but that is just going to be awesome. Imagine the Riddler's tactical brilliance guiding the Joker's brute force. No one in Gotham is safe. He even says the Riddler's signature catchphrase to him.
Riddle me this.
In Bruce's final scene with Selina, she says she's going to Bloodhaven, that's a smaller city near Gotham, where Nightwing operates in the comics. The channel Heavy Spoilers pointed out that her final line, "The Batman is spoken for by Gotham," is actually from the Batman Year Zero comic, where Alfred says it. And he also reminded me that Selina scratches Carmine Falcone's face, just like she does in the Year One comic. And finally, if you stayed through the end credits, you might have seen the Green Riddler text with the question mark logo, leading you to radalada.com. Now, if you go to the site, you get asked a series of riddles, and if you give the correct answers, it unlocks the Thomas Wayne smear ad that the Riddler created. Well, that's all the Easter eggs that we found, but if you found any, let us know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.